December 11th, 2025 meeting? If so, I entertain a motion to accept
I'll
those.
make that
Holly.
motion.
Okay, Holly, second by Bruce. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay, report of action of the executive committee meeting held January 22nd. Sam, I'm gonna let you do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the executive committee on the board met on January 22nd. They approved an amendment to the KHC defined contribution plan for employee retirement match. Nationwide Financial Services, Inc. is the plan provider for the plan, and they required KHC to adopt a new form for the adoption agreement. The only substantive change that was made to the plan was an expansion of the elective deferral options for employees. So in addition to contributing to a 401k plan, KHC will now match contributions to 457 plans and deemed IRA plans through Kentucky Deferred Comp. The executive committee also approved an amendment to KHC's existing contract with the Corporation for Supportive Housing to allow CSH to work with partners involved in Louisville's Home for Good initiative, including Louisville Metro Government, the Coalition for the Homeless, United Way, and others. Finally, the executive committee approved two other contracts. One with Leap Forward to provide workforce development services for the Kentucky Balance of State Continuum of Care program, which is required under that program. And then one with Capital Edge Consulting to assist with the preparation and response to any possible HUD procurement under the Performance-Based Contract Administrator program. So that concludes the report of the executive committee action.
Do any members have any questions of Sam or in regard to the executive committee? Okay, do we need a motion to adopt that?
No, sir, it's just information.
All right, okay. All right, Sam, you're up again. Authorization to renew a personal service contract with Balance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as I described earlier, KHC is the sponsor of a 401A defined contribution plan. The executive team serves as trustees for the plan, and in the capacity will require investment advice from properly licensed investment advisors. In 2024, we issued an RFP for investment advisor services, and we only received one response. We evaluated the response and selected Ballast. We have the option to renew for 2 additional years, so this would be the second renewal of this contract. So KHC staff recommends approval by the Board of Directors of a resolution authorizing us to enter into a personal service contract with Ballast, Inc. for $16,000 for fiscal year 27.
Any members have any questions of Sam? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve.
So moved.
Okay, Will, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay, so, we're down to number 5, Marty, talking about the Public Housing Agency Annual Plan for Rental Assistance, Program.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chairman Denham, Winston, and members of the board. I am here today to speak to you regarding the KHC's Public Housing Agency Annual Plan, and with board's approval, signatures for the required documents for submission. KHC's Housing Choice Voucher Program is required by federal regulation to submit a public housing plan to HUD on an annual basis. In the plan, regulations require KHC to describe programs, operations, and strategies for meeting local housing needs. Instead of our normal presentation where I actually just go through the plan, we have certain sections, I'd like to fill you in on some of the things that we are doing during the shortfall time period. As a reminder, effective March of 2025, HUD designated KHC's Housing Choice Voucher Program officially in a funding shortfall for calendar year 25, which stopped our ability to issue new vouchers, lease additional families, or enter into new project-based voucher contracts. We are also awaiting budget numbers for calendar year 2026, and at HUD's directive, we must continue the shortfall action plan currently in place into this year. The Housing Choice Voucher Program has focused on other areas. Some of the items that I'll mention today are in our annual plan. We have implemented new policies and procedures that allowed us to maintain housing for families that are currently on our program. We continue to promote landlord engagement and partnership through KHC's website and our egrams. We continue to focus our implementation of federal guidelines involving the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act of 2016 as they become available. We are also moving away from paper-driven processes to an online paperless environment to increase our efficiencies. With this shift, we have managed to achieve cost reduction in several areas: paper, postage, use of printers, 80% reduction in tenant calls, and customer satisfaction for families as files are processed quicker using our new online processes. At this time, I would like to request approval of the Public Housing Agency Annual Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate your hard work on this.
Thank
And
you.
Do any members have any questions of Marty in regard to this plan? Kathy?
I just want to say that it's just such a horror that we can't bring on new people. It's been over a year.
Yes, ma'am.
And yet, the state legislature doesn't seem to want to recognize that we're having to serve fewer and fewer households, and the costs are going up.
Yes.
I hope we can emphasize to the state legislature how much our hands are tied.
Yes. Yes.
And that the state should step in and do something.
Yes, we struggle with that every day.
Yes.
Tugs on our heartstrings.
Yes.
Yes.
So thank you for the good work.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Why not?
Any other members have any questions of Marty? Marty, you and your staff do wonderful work, and we
Thank you.
appreciate you helping these folks. They certainly need it, so.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'll entertain a motion that we approve this plan. Kathy, and I have a second, Bruce. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Heather, you're gonna talk about the recommendations of the programs, policy and planning committee.
Yes, sir. The Programs Policy and Planning Committee met last week on February 18th, and we had an overview of the items that are enumerated at item 6 on your agenda. There was one item that the committee was asked to review and approve and make a motion to this board to adopt, and we did so. But before asking you all to kind of bless our motion, I'd like to have you all review the materials. John, do you want to talk about the 2026 strategies?
Thank you, Inspector. Good afternoon, members of the board. John Davidson, and I'm going to give a Q2 update for fiscal 26. I'll remind everyone, we do generally an update to you all mid-year through 12/31, and we do that in February, and then we'll come back in August and tell you how we did for the entire year. One thing I wanted to note and reiterate, this is an informational item only, no action related to this presentation, so, but it's for informational purposes. First thing I will remind everyone of is there's 3 corporate strategies that the executive team adopts and deliberates with and shares for the corporation for strategy. The first is addressing Kentucky's housing supply gap. That's probably no news to anyone. You're going to hear about that, and you've heard about that. You've seen that probably in the news. As the first item underneath there is we're ensuring that the housing supply gap remains a prominent policy issue, and maybe that the world knows that we have a supply issue and we have a housing gap. Also, building partners and relationships with partners that are non-traditional partners. So those meetings are going on, and we've got members of KHC staff going out and trying to build some relationships to get the word out about the housing gap and partnering with those individuals. Secondly, the mitigating and financial and missional risk. I'll just talk a little bit about a couple of those items. The first is responding to programmatic changes while communicating the essential value of all the programs we administer to legislators, grantors. We've been doing that, and we continue to do that very proactively. And then last but not least, we are maintaining the financial stewardship of our financial resources and effective risk management. So wanted to share that as well. And the last strategy there is sustain and advance core competencies. I'm going to highlight C there, which is explore ways to utilize artificial intelligence, which is the hot topic of everything to improve our customer experience and operational. You heard a little bit from Marty. We're really leaning into some of our technology and trying to make things easier for folks and streamline some items, and it's yielding some results. So I'm going to give you some examples for each, but before I do that, I'll stop there or I'll pause there. Are there any questions about those? All right. If you don't mind to advance the, thank you. I'm going to hit a couple of highlights for each of these strategies. The first one is the addressing the housing supply gap. What I will draw your attention to is $305.1 million in loan production on a goal of $500 million in our single family. Keep in mind, these are through 12/31. So ideally, we'll be halfway to our goal. We're over that, so we're roughly 60% there, and these are as of 12/31. Delivered $90 million in rental payments to 22,654 PBCA. In our tenant assistance program, I'll remind everybody, our tenant assistance program, we have subsidy tied to the unit, which is our project-based, and then we have subsidy tied to through vouchers, which is the next piece that I'm going to share, the $15.6 million in rental payments to 4,115 families. So if you add that roughly 4,115 to the 22,651, I mean, that's the real impact of the rental assistance in the state of Kentucky, that the corporation is administering dollars in helping families and providing some rental assistance. It's one of the biggest areas that we have an impact. So, again, tracking nicely along there based on our benchmark and our fiscal year goal. Almost 5,000 households served through our homeless programs. There is a myriad of homeless programs underneath Wendy's purview. Again, we're projecting 6,185. We're almost at 5,000. You can see that we're on track. Nothing too surprising there. Last but not least, you're going to hear a lot more about multifamily programs in a couple of agenda items. But the 647 units created and preserved via our tax-exempt bonds, you might look at that and think, well, that 2,000, where are we way off? It's a function of timing. This is a function of closings. This is a function of rounds. It is a process to get these units up and on, and so, but you'll hear more about that. And I would, any questions about the housing supply gap?
I just might make the comment that the work you all have done about addressing the housing supply gap and letting the public know is unbelievable. I use Wendy's her survey almost every day to try to explain to people here's why we need housing, and Wendy's comment, I think, that's where jobs go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important, and I want to thank you all for the work you've done on that.
Thank you. If you'll advance it one more. Yeah, thank you. Number 2, mitigate financial risk. You're going to hear a report later from Tracy, but some of these are very specific to our financial risk. 837 loans per employee on a goal of 700. That metric is sort of an industry standard that has been used for a while in Tracy and Derek's area. So next, 3.9 million in net, I'll emphasize net secondary market gains on a goal of 5 million. So we're tracking nicely, again, 60%. And then you'll see that $400 and almost $80,000 in collected in PBCA MOR. That stands for Management Occupancy Review Fees to defer cost for inspecting units on a goal of 775. The important thing to note here is our PBCA program under contract with HUD, it been in limbo for decades, a long time. But we earn a fee that is above what it costs to administer the program. That fee is what helps us invest initially and operate some of the other programs that are on a little tighter budget. So that's super important, is what I'll say. Go ahead.
And part of that due to the innovative way of scheduling inspection units that we received the prize for?
I'm going to defer that. Go ahead.
Well, That is innovative, but that's over in our inspections for Section 8 vouchers.
Oh, not project
This
based.
is our project-based
Project-based.
rent assistance, which is a kind of a separate contract with HUD. And we are actually required to go on site for all of that, and we interact with property management companies, not tenants, for that.
94% of our eligible reimbursable programs are covered by administrative fees. For monitoring purposes, the goal is 100%. We want to make sure we are recouping every single admin dollar we get to administer our programs. So that is something that Kendrick in his area do. So we're keeping an eye on that and running it pretty tightly, and we've still got some time to achieve that 100%, 6 months in. Last but not least, any questions about the financial risk? Last but certainly not least is sustaining and advancing our core competencies, which is our third strategy. I'm going to highlight a couple of things. We've processed over 3,000 draws for not only subrecipients but also partner agencies to actually keep their doors open, operational, all of those things. I will note we had a benchmark of $65 million at the beginning of the year. We're almost at $62 million, six months through. I will say we have been experiencing some disruptions in the systems that the federal systems that HUD administers to get these dollars out. And so Kendrick and his team have been doing that, and the executive team has been monitoring that to make sure that those disruptions that we're seeing are of minimal impact to our recipients and our partner agencies out there so that they can continue to operate and serve the clients that they serve. 750 attendees for the Kentucky Affordable Housing Conference. Some of you all were able to attend. We will be having our conference in August for this year. But that was on a goal of 675, so good attendance there. Last couple or few, we were launching a new website with refreshed content. That is underway right now in our communications area. Implemented a new HRIS system, which is our HR information system. We have moved to one that is substantially more user-friendly, but also it empowers employees a lot more to be able to be in control of their deferrals, their elections, all of the things that they need to be doing and provide valuable information. And then I mentioned it earlier, but the developing AI guidance and preparation for utilizing some AI tools. So we've got an interim policy. We've also got, we're looking at and implementing and on track to implement Microsoft Copilot at the organization. And we're strategically walking through that. There's also, with our new website, the potential to use a chat bot and things of that nature. But I wanted to share all of those as things that are going on at the corporation related to sustaining and advancing core competencies. So, informational only, but hopefully that is nothing but a good report. Any questions?
Yeah, I should have asked before, but an 80% reduction in calls?
Mm-hmm.
Is that because there's certain questions that, like, where am I on the waiting list, that now no one has to call, they can see it? Is that where it comes from? It doesn't come from.
In large part, it's twofold. One, people can see it online, but also we have restructured the staffing, so
There you go.
the staff in our Section 8 program have a caseload, so tenants know who to call. There's a specific person, and they can answer their question. And most of our calls are, did you get my paperwork, or has my landlord called you, or some kind of status update.
Okay, but now they can see that, because it's checked off.
They can
in
see it,
their
but some folks
file.
still are gonna call and they wanna talk to
Oh,
someone.
of course,
Yeah.
and it does require someone to have the ability and to use their money to pay for electronic, to have internet.
Sure. Some folks go to the library, and we've even, especially as we've rolled this out, because this was a big learning curve for tenants, where we said you've got to do like your income recertification online. Well, sometimes our staff are on the phone with someone when they're at their public library, sometimes with the librarian to help someone, go through the steps.
Okay.
So there has been a learning curve for folks.
I just worry about the cost, when people have it on their phone data plan.
But again, they can do it at the library, and many folks have, yeah.
And I'll add one additional piece to that. today, right now, there might be clients over in our main building. There is a laptop over there that is available for use, and tenant assistants will literally walk through and help folks walk through that.
No,
So,
I think it's
yeah,
great. I
so.
always worry about, the outliers.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have people who have like mobility issues that can't get to the library, can't get to places, and do you have a way to serve those people?
I'm gonna be honest, we serve 87 counties. So we do not have an office everywhere. We do not have the availability for everyone to meet with a staff person. But what we have done is gotten on the phone, sometimes with someone with a disability, or sometimes it might be their child, their niece or nephew, and sit down and we get on the phone and go through it with them. Sometimes that's the best we can do if they absolutely cannot get to the library. I wanna make sure it's clear, most people have a phone, y'all. Most people do. And one of the things that has really been an upside to this is we're now able to send a text out to say, your income recertification is due. If you don't get it to us by this date, you risk termination. We don't want to terminate anyone right now because we are in shortfall.
Yeah.
If we terminate a tenant, we don't get to issue another voucher to a new tenant. So we want to keep terminations as low as possible and keep housing people. So we're proactively reminding people, and texts seem to be working way better than emails.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. Will we ever add to our utility allowance provision by an internet provider?
I have no
Like
idea.
gas heat
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
electric heat, because it's, I
Well, the
just
question
think
would
we
be, would
should
you also pay
consider
cell phone
that.
bills? Because a lot of folks don't have Wi-Fi, they just use their data service, right?
Right, yeah. I just, if we could think of, in the future when all the money is coming
Yeah.
in.
I will say not right now, because we don't have any
No,
extra
not
budget
right
money,
now.
so we can't pay the difference.
I just plant that
Yeah.
seed.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you all.
Thank you, John. We appreciate your hard work.
And the committee also heard from Kendrick, and he is here to present the 2026 allocation.
Good afternoon. My name is Kendrick Vonderschmidt. I'm the Managing Director of Corporate Planning and Accountability, and my team puts together these numbers for this report. This is us looking back at the first 2 quarters through what we put together in May and approved by the board, the allocation plan. The first page here is our grant and fee income actuals through 2 quarters. I'll direct your attention to line LL at the bottom, which is our bottom line number that says that at this point in the year, we have collected $20,797,858 in fees and admin expenses, and grant admin through 2 quarters. And that puts us at 53% of what we projected, right where we should be for the fiscal year. Now, within that number, there are things that are higher than expected, and there are things that are lower than expected. So we can break that down a little bit. I will begin by saying that other than the first section, A through I, the majority of these lines are grant reimbursable, which means that if we do not experience expenses from running our programs, we're not able to draw those funds down. So we'll begin by looking at some of the lower than expected numbers. Line D, our 811 program, we're still bringing that program up to speed. We haven't experienced any expenses, and we expect to see some activity in the second half of the year. I'll draw your attention down to our homelessness programs, specifically line U and line V, and line BB under our other section. These are a couple of grant programs within the COC panoply of programs. During the funding freeze and then during some litigation that went on around the COC panoply of programs, we pulled back on some activity in the COC programs in order to kind of save the money that we knew we did have, and we moved some of those activities to other grant programs, specifically Home ARP, which you can find on line N, which is elevated for where we would expect it to be at this time of the fiscal year. We also experienced some extra activity for our connectors on line P, which is our home our ERA 2 program, which with some treasury funds that has finally wound down as of September 30th. Finally, we can see decreased or less than expected value on line CC for our HOF program. We're still winding that program down as program dollars expend or run out for that program, and that program sunsets on September 30th of this calendar year. Are there any questions on grant and fee income? Your second page is a graphical representation of that same information. It is on a percentage basis, and I've added a 50% line this year for this graph to kind of show you where we would be through 2 quarters as well. We'll move on to our, we can think of as program dollars out the door by program area. First, we'll look at our energy programs. We're able to award $5.9 million in weatherization assistance, which is our normal DOE-funded weatherization program. And I'll draw your attention to line C, our LIHEAP program, which also weatherizes homes. We got far more money than we were conservatively estimating last May that we would receive. This is at a time where we were very unsure about what we were going to get in for the LIHEAP program, and we estimated a very conservative $1.6 million, and we've actually awarded just under $8 million to our partners around the state, which is much closer to business as usual than what we estimated back in May. Next, moving down to both the Housing Contract Administration and the finance area, I want to point out just before we get into the line by line, there are a lot of gaps in here. We do a lot of work in the first 2 quarters of the year to make a lot of awards in the second 2 quarters of the year, whether it be that from our home and AHTF awards, our tax and bond awards, and pairing some of those funds with our LIHTC credits. So we have made awards for our line E, our Continuum of Care program. We've put out most of those awards already this year, and just a handful remained for Q1 of this year. We had made about a half of our awards, $1.5 million in awards with our ESG, our Emergency Solutions Grant Program, on line F. We have made, and we match some of those funds with some funds here at the corporation on line G. That's our half match for some of these homelessness grants. And then you'll see some of those gaps where we are still making those awards on lines H, I, J, and K, where we are still expecting some more activity in these areas of the corporation in Q3 and Q4. Moving down to line N under multifamily finance, the tax-exempt bond, we were able to rush some tax-exempt bond closings out before the end of the year. We've made $138.7 million in tax-exempt bond closings through 2 quarters, and we expect more activity in tax-exempt bonds through the rest of the year. And we were able to award some program income from home to a couple of multifamily projects. You can see that on line P, we only estimated $5.7 million. We were able to put out an additional $5 million in program income that we had to award to plug some holes in some projects to make them whole. Finally, on line T, I think Terry's mentioned before when she talked about the qualified allocation. We do leave some credits left over from the previous year to kind of plug some projects if they have cost overruns or something like that. And we've put $3.5 million into projects like that. We'll put more projects, more funds into most of that activity occurs in Q1 and Q2. All right, finally, moving down to single-family programs. As John mentioned, we have our loan volume so far for the year is $305 million on a goal of $500 million, so we are ahead of schedule there. And that has moved very parallel with our down payment assistance funded by the HAF program of $14.6 million, both at 60% of where you would think they would be based on our goals. And I mentioned the HOF program on the previous table. We've put out $7.5 million through that program on line X, and that is 75% of what we expect for to wind that program down. Down on tenant assistance programs, I generally say that these programs run like a metronome. It's very expected how much funding will put out each quarter, each month really, in people's monthly rent. And those are both hovering right at 50% on line AA and BB. Any questions about the
I
allocations?
have the dumbest question of all. Awarded, some of that also means paid, and some of it just means we got it under contract.
Yes, so
Okay.
it really
I'm not as
depends,
dumb
it
as I thought.
really depends on the program, and it's
Yes.
really not a dumb question at all,
Like
because we are.
Section 8,
Yep,
it's paid.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Section 8 is probably the best example of something that's paid out, whereas the majority of our grant programs are something that we have awarded to a subrecipient.
Okay.
All right. The next page of your packet will be the same kind of graphical representation of that information just for the weatherization program, because LIHEAP blew the doors off of my percentage basis. Then the following page is, again, the graphical representation of the data, this time for the remainder of that table. Again, you're seeing large gaps at 0%. Most of the activity will take place in Q3 and Q4. The final table in this packet is the same information that we have discussed about the program by program area. This is by 3 different funding types: the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the Home Program, and the Housing Assistance Fund. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund, you can see, has had no activity so far this year. We've had limited activity under the Home Program, most of it being that Home PI that we discussed. And down at under the Housing Assistance Fund, you can see that the Housing Assistance Fund is the primary driver of our down payment assistance program. Again, putting out $14.6 million through Q2. Are there any questions about this table?
Kendrick, how come, no activity in the affordable housing trust fund?
Again, this is on an awarded basis. We make most of those awards in Q3 and Q4.
Okay.
We've made some of those multifamily awards in Q3, and most of that activity really happens in Q4.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and the final page from here, again, is a graphical representation of that same table. Are there any questions?
Very impressive.
Thank you.
Terry is going to present the state qualified allocation plan for low income housing tax credit. After her presentation, this would require a motion if y'all agree to accept the recommendation of the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Sam will kind of move along quickly because there's a lot of information. So I'm going to give you some updates for the on our multifamily programs that we have going on. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background, in the multifamily programs, we do a lot of allocation of the low-income housing tax credits and the taxable tax-exempt bonds. So that's when you all usually see me, is when I have those projects here to present to you all today. So the low-income housing tax credit is not a HUD program. It is something that is issued through the Treasury. It is an IRS. Based on population. Every state housing finance agency will get a award of a low-income housing tax credits. You'll hear me call them housing tax credits, LIHTC tax credits, so it's all in the same. So I might say 9%. So developers use the tax credits to raise equity for their projects from investors. One thing the IRS does require KHC is to have a qualified allocation plan, which is what's going to be presented to you all today for your consideration. The QAP will identify all of our selection criteria for our projects. In the past, we have issued a 1-year QAP. We've done a 2-year just recently, and then we'll have some changes for this year. The LIHTCs are very, very much in demand. Though we have only about a $15 million allocation every single year, that doesn't seem like much, but what it does, it calculates into equity for all of our projects. So in this sample, $1 million awarded to a project in credits based over a 10-year period is when the investor gets to take those credits off their taxes. 80 cents per credit is a little bit low. It's about 84 cents, but it just makes it easier to multiply in the calculation. And then you multiply that by the investor's ownership of the project. And it's usually typically 99.99% of their ownership. So that $1 million in credits will equate to almost $8 million in equity for that project. So it's huge. So we may not get a huge allocation. It is huge for our investors. So that is why it is in such great demand. So just to give you a little bit of context about our funding round, this is something that we just awarded in January 30th. We just made these awards, and all of these awards are based because of our out of our qualified allocation plan. So we had 31 applications submitted, over $35 million in ask. So it is like a double ask. We just don't have enough money to go around. So we ended up funding 15 projects and awarded $15.9 million in tax credits to these projects.
From a demand, is that consistent with prior years?
It is.
Or up, or-
It is. It's about a 2-for-1 every single year. We're hoping that with some changes that we're going to be putting in place that we might be able to, because the 16 projects that did not get funded, they've already paid for all of the fees. I mean, it's about a $50,000 to $100,000 fees that the developers are paying just to be able to put an application. So we're hoping to put some processes in place so that our developers don't have to pay so much money. We're going to be doing a pre-application. But it is consistent.
Is the
So-
federal government, one other question on that, is the federal government looking at increasing the allocation for tax credits to address the housing supply?
Well, in the one big beautiful bill that we just got passed last summer, we got a 12% increase in our tax credits. So that is something that did happen. So we got about $1.5 million more this year than we did in the year before.
Okay, thank you.
So this is just a summary table of what we have awarded. So in our LIHTC, we had a total of $16 million. We received about a $278,000 additional credits from the national pool. The national pool is just something where they collect all the unused credits, then you can apply, just send in a letter, and then if you're awarded, you're able to get some additional credits. So the $35 million in requested, and we ended up awarding the 15.9. So we have about $90,000 in credits still on our table. That way, if we have projects that come in, they have a shortfall, we're able to help them if they have any type of gaps. We did award some HUD Home Investment Partnership Program funds of $1.8 million, Kentucky Affordable Housing Program, Affordable Housing Trust Fund of $500,000, and the Rural Housing Trust Fund, we awarded $4.5 million in this particular funding round. So just to show you where those projects are located at throughout the congressional districts. We were able to fund projects in all 6 congressional districts this year. We have a total of 578 new supply units, 120 existing supply units, so in all those 15 projects. So that's a total of 698 units that will be coming online in the next couple of years.
I would assume you all look at this over a period of time, not just a one-year deal, look at what your allocations are across the districts for 3, 5.
We can, we
10.
have the information in our system, yes. But we do try to fund in every district. It's not mandated in our qualified allocation plan, but we do take that we do look at that.
But some of this is mandated by the disasters.
And we did have a Western Kentucky disaster funding round a couple of years ago, so that was,
So
we did
sometimes
use
there's
that.
spikes because of the disaster.
All right, and so this is just a map of where those awards were that we just did in January. So you see Western Kentucky did really well. They got 6 projects, I believe it is, in Western Kentucky. And that's just a little map of where everything is.
My point was if you just looked at it on a one-year basis, you'd say, well, man, it looks like you're slighting Eastern Kentucky.
It is very difficult for the 9% tax credits to get into Eastern Kentucky. It's a very difficult transaction for some of the developers. They're more on the single-family development side, so getting the multifamily side it's really hard.
Well, there also just aren't very many communities. Really, we like to see 40 units or more
Mhm.
in a 9% tax credit project because there's a lot of soft costs. And a lot of communities in Eastern Kentucky don't have it'd be hard to get get a site for it, get demand for it, and get the desire to live in a 40-unit multiplex. It's not impossible. We do have plenty of tax credit properties in East Kentucky. It's just not as robust as other parts of the state.
Is that an educational issue?
I don't believe so.
Do
We have a lot
homeowners
of,
need to be educated, or?
no, we have a lot of housing partners in East Kentucky and a major CDFI, FAHI, out of Eastern Kentucky that supports them.
It's just harder.
They sure have tried.
Yeah, it's just harder with larger units, larger projects.
And if anyone's interested, we have a visualization of a map that Kendrick's department puts together that shows all of the tax credit awards over time by county, so that you could, like you're pointing to, Bill, you could look at the cumulative, projects awarded.
Would a state low-income housing tax credit be more equitable for development of single-family?
For single I really have no idea.
To help out
Yeah,
Eastern Kentucky.
Ohio is experimenting with that.
Okay.
All right, next slide, Sam. So this is our distribution of our tax credit. So this is what is in our qualified allocation plan. This is an important part of that. So for existing supply, we state that we will take 10% of our tax credits and put them towards existing supply. So for this particular funding round we just did last month, we awarded 1.8 and 10% of our credits was 1.6. So we actually allocated 12% of our tax credits and 3 projects. For new supply, we will allocate the 90% of our tax credits between urban and balance of state. So urban is your Lexington, Louisville, and the 3 northern counties of Kenton, Campbell, and Boone. We awarded 4 projects at 26% of those tax credits, and the balance of state received 8 projects with 62% of our tax credits. Some of the documents that govern my department are the qualified allocation plan, our multifamily guidelines, and the multifamily minimum design standards. What is our goal? Our goal is to build more units, build them faster, and to mitigate the cost per unit, which we are kind of at a leveling right now as far as costs, but they're not coming down as quickly as we would like to see them. So what are we doing to mitigate those? We met in September and October. We had about 50 one-on-one meetings with our partners and our stakeholders. We met with development companies, the Kentucky Affordable Housing Coalition, units of local government, city, county, and some area development districts, some housing nonprofits and coalitions, some funders, investors, and some financial institutions. And we asked them, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to change? Some of those were some hard conversations that we had, but we found even in at our conference every year, we have a developer forum. The developers are about maybe 3 or 5 of them are always the ones that are vocal, but there's many of them who are not vocal and they don't want to speak in front of a large crowd for whatever reason. So we had these one-on-one meetings with our partners. So this is just a list of some of those, of the ones that we met with. You see your local leaders, Lexington, Louisville, Bowling Green, Covington, Northern Kentucky Ad, Owensboro, Lincoln Trail Ad, the nonprofits, Homeless and Housing Coalition, FAHI, Louisville Coalition for the Homeless, Balance of State Continuum of Care, Family Scholar House, Independent Living Council, Metropolitan Housing Coalition. We have a list of our funders, financial institution, and these are all the developers that we spoke with. Again, we had one-on-one developer meetings with them to find out what was working and what was not working. So, steps to date, how did we get here? September and October, we had our meeting with all of our partners. In January, we presented all of our results from our partners to the deputy executive directors here at Kentucky Housing Corporation. On the 14th, we had a What's Changing webinar. We invited everyone that we met with and even the public to come and listen to the changes that we're going to be implementing and what we're wanting to do. And then on February 10th, we held our legally required QAP public hearing, opened up the public comment period. That public comment period ended on the 17th, and then on the 18th, Wendy presented to the Programs Policy and Planning Committee. So what do we need to do to go forward? So today I'm presenting to you the information from the qualified allocation plan. Tomorrow, in the next few days, provided with your consideration, we can send the qualified allocation plan to the governor's office for approval. And then in May of this year, we will open up our 2027 application for those tax credits. Those applications will be due in August, and then we will make our next funding round announcements in January of 2027. So, for your consideration today is the 2027-2029 Qualified Allocation Plan. How will we allocate our credits in the coming years? The first thing that we're going to be doing, we want to change, is we want to have a longer term of our Qualified Allocation Plan. Again, before we used to be on a 1 year, we changed it to a 2 year, and now we want to go to a 3-year Qualified Allocation Plan. One is predictability for our developers. They can plan ahead. They know what we're asking for. They know what the scoring criteria will be. We have developers who are now looking at 2-3 years ahead of where they want to find a site, where they want to build. So this will help them in that. So our current cycle ends at the end of this year, and our proposed changes will be going from January 1st, 2027 through December 31st of 2029. The second change that we would like to implement is in the existing supply set aside. Currently, we say that we will award the lesser of 10% of available credits or 2 applications. We want to change that language and just say that we're going to award approximately 10% of our credits to the existing supply. It's just a little bit of a language change is what we're doing. The third change is we had a scoring criteria of donated land. We would like to now change this to, and I'll mess this word up really easy, negligible land cost. So it will say the same, it's just the donated piece of it was, everybody knew the intent, it just had some unintended consequences. Sometimes the land that they got that was donated wasn't prime property. It was located in a flood zone, so then they had those issues. So now we just want to kind of change that. So we want to see that they have no more than $5,000 in their underwriting model for their land and building acquisitions. So that's what we're looking for. This item will not be a separate scoring item. It will get folded into our permanent below market resources. And so here's where you'll see that land cost in our below market resources. The other thing that we did add is this local government waivers to reduce fees, so tap fees. Sometimes rural governments or rural areas don't have any donated land, or that's about the only thing that they can offer to the project to help reduce those costs. So we went ahead and we added that into our below market resources. The other item that we're changing here is on our below market loans. We did have this at no more than 1% interest, but this is really an unrealistic interest rate in today's market, so we were going up to 4%. So those are all the updates, changes to our qualified allocation plan that we are presenting to you all today. I do wanted to kind of note just some other notable changes to our multifamily guidelines. Through all of our conversations with our stakeholders and partners, we realized that our developer fee that our developers can earn had not been changed, had not been increased in the past 10 years. So that was huge. This is something that they utilize, for their projects. So in 27, with our applications, the maximum developer fee will go from $1.2 million to $1.8 million for 9% projects. Also is our maximum cap increase for the amount of credits that each developer can request. Right now, the most that they can request is $1.5 million. We're going to increase it up to $1.8. That allows our developers to possibly do 2 medium-sized projects or 1 really nice large project. And then I mentioned earlier, we're doing a pre-application for our 9% applications. This will allow them to be able to submit the blind ranking information that we ask for in our qualified allocation plan, and we will then post those rankings before the full application. One, it will help reduce the costs that our developers have to pay in order to come into the full application. We'll rank them, we'll post them. They then have the opportunity to either move forward with that or withdraw if they don't think that they are going to be able to score high enough. And then the last thing that we're updating for multifamily is our minimum design standards. For those of you all who are listed on the E-grams, an E-gram went out this morning with a draft copy of our minimum design standards. And there will be a comment period that Joe Pritchard is going to be receiving any comments on. So these are just some of the most notable changes that we have eliminated. Some redundant building code language, parking requirements was big. Removed some stringent energy efficiency regulations, references to outdated documents that was in the minimum design standards. And then we added a section for modular home compliance. We're also allowing for windows other than solid vinyl. Removed a requirement for medicine cabinets. Allowed for a broader range of durable cabinet option. Removed Energy Star requirement for common area appliances, and removed communication requirements such as telephone, cable, and internet hookups. This will now be at the investors, and the market will now drive that owner's decisions about those amenities. So, with all of that, I know that was a lot of information, and I appreciate your time, but staff would now like to recommend the approval of the qualified allocation plan for 2027-2029 to be effective for the awards for housing credits made on or after January 1st of 2027. The approved QAP will then be forwarded to the Governor of the Commonwealth for endorsement.
Terry, I'll be happy to move. Would you entertain a question though?
Absolutely.
So,
Sorry.
Great presentation, very easy, even for me to follow. You mentioned all the one-on-one meetings.
Mhm.
What would have been one or two, what the developers would have considered significant impediments or irritants that you weren't able to possibly address?
I think gosh,
I can offer one.
okay.
And I want to give Terry a lot of credit because this process is pretty different than what we've done in previous years. In previous years, we would have a couple of group forums where people could say what they were concerned about, but it would be the same 5 folks talking, and we really wouldn't get rich feedback, particularly not from banks or other intermediaries or syndicators or nonprofits. So she really did, it took a lot of time, and I want to applaud her for that. One of the biggest things we heard was developers are a little bit gamblers, right? They want, they think every year they might have the shot at getting the most credits, the best funding that they want for their project. So they would like us to go to a 1-year QAP where we do this entire process every single year, so they might have a shot at getting the scoring they want in there. We are doing a 3-year because it is our belief that if we want local areas, local banks, local philanthropies, employers, and governments to partner, they need a longer runway of consistent policy. And so I would say that's the biggest one is they want a 1 year, and I think that just comes down to they just think every year they might get better scoring, they might get what they want. I couldn't riddle that. I really thought they'd not throw us a parade, but like the idea of 3-year predictability of what the rules are. They did not seem, a couple liked it, but overwhelmingly most of them just wanted it to change every year.
Yes, I would agree.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
It didn't occur to me before, but you put in 4% instead of tied to prime or something, and it's supposed to last 3 years. What if interest rates go all kerflooey?
Are you talking about the below market resources?
Yeah. You didn't tie it to something that adjusts over time,
No,
It's
this is
3
only good for
years.
3 years, right, yeah. What we're saying is
next year the interest rates are 14%,
we do have the ability to alter it, should we
have the
see
ability
fit.
to alter.
Yes.
Let's
Okay,
hope
that's what you
interest
have.
rates don't go up to 4%.
Yes.
Who here has lived through that?
21.
Yeah.
Oh,
Our thought
gosh.
behind that was if let's say a foundation or an employer was willing to make a low interest loan, we had it at 1%, and that was just unreasonably too low. And so we wanted to give room for it to at least hold with inflation, but basically be really low cost capital.
No, I totally agreed, but
Yeah.
when I just realized 3 years,
Yeah,
I think
a lot could change.
everything.
We just weren't that crafty.
But we can change it, so that's.
Absolutely. You might see me here next year, so.
I move, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Thank you. Heather, do you have any comments you wanna make before we vote?
I'll defer to the committee if there's anything that you guys wanna talk about that we didn't talk about as a group, but I personally don't have anything.
Okay, I wanna thank Heather, and I wanna thank your committee and the staff for working on this, because this is really important, issue here. So I have a motion from Mr. Jones. Do I have a second? Okay, I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay,
Thank
Terry,
you.
You're gonna be up for a while.
I am. I should just bring a chair with me, I thought.
Okay, so you
All
wanna
right.
talk about the personal service contract?
I have 3 personal service contracts to offer for consideration today. The first one is the personal service contract with Gibson Consulting. They do our market analysis, third-party review of any market studies that we receive for our applications. And so they have the expertise, and they provide us with their results, what their opinion is of that market study. So in March of 2025, we did have a request for proposals, and they were selected by the review committee. We do have the option of renewing that contract for 2 consecutive years following the initial term, and this is the first renewal.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Terry in regard to this renewal? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve. So moved. Got Mayor, thank you. Do I have a second?
I have a question. I'm looking at the document. And it looks like we have a January 26th and a January 25th date on the signature page.
Oh,
Uh,
I can speak to that. Are you talking about for the resolution?
I think on the contract itself, Sam,
Contract, yeah.
page 11 of the actual contract.
Terry signed it 26
And here's what
and Jim, somebody,
Jim Howell.
Hal signed it 25.
I suspect, I don't know for sure, but I suspect he may have just put 2025 because it was very close in time to the changeover from 25 to 26, but we could get the contract re-executed.
I think it's a renewal, so
Mhm.
this would be originally, the 25 would be right?
We send out new contracts for them to sign, so I believe he should have signed it in 2026.
Okay.
But as Sam mentioned, maybe because of the changing of the year, he just inadvertently put 25.
So you're gonna correct that, right?
We will get that corrected, yes.
Thank you.
You know how many things I signed?
Okay, so I had a motion, do I have a second?
I make mistakes sometimes, but.
Second.
I need a second, all right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Terry, so you got a personal service contract with Value Tech?
Yes, this is for the same exact item for our market study reviews, not to exceed 40,000. And again, this is the first renewal of that contract.
So moved.
All right, so I have a motion. Anybody have any questions of Terry? Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Jones. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion, second by Kathy. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay, Terry, you've got a couple more.
Okay, this is our personal service contract for Volbridge. They do the market study reviews for multifamily programs. They also do a rent comparability studies for the tenant assistance program. So their contract is a little bit more at 60,000. Again, this is a renewal. This is the first renewal for this particular contract.
Okay, anybody have any questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion that it be approved.
Make a motion.
Okay, Heather, do I have a second? Okay, thanks. And, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign, motion carries. One more?
Yes. So today I have a resolution to allow for a securitization of 330 Newtown apartments. The Board of Directors originally authorized $24 million in bond for this particular project in December of 2020. These bonds were issued in 2021. The project involved new construction of 200 units in Lexington. Now that the construction is complete and the project now in the hands of KHC's compliance monitoring team, the developer is requesting through bond counsel that KHC allow for the amended and restated bond financing agreement, which will allow this for the securitization of the existing CRBT loan through Freddie Mac. Through this process, Freddie Mac will purchase the loan and package it to a mortgage-backed security that can be sold to the secondary market. So we are asking for your we recommend approval by the Board of Directors of this change to the bond financing agreement.
So this is an amendment to that agreement.
Yes.
Anybody have any questions of Terry? If not, I'll entertain a motion to be approved.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion second. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Barry.
Thank you so
We
much.
appreciate your hard work. Okay, Barry, reported the action and recommendations of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. The Finance Committee of the Kentucky Housing Corporation Board of Directors met virtually at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, February 24th on 2026. Tracy Thurston, Chief Financial Officer, led the meeting by presenting the financial updates for the corporation as of December 31st, 2025. Highlighted throughout the financial updates was the impact of returning to issue mortgage revenue bonds as a mechanism to finance mortgages, resulting in the growth in both corporate assets and liabilities. Tracy will provide a similar update for the full board today. Tracy also presented a report on the mortgage activity for fiscal year 2026. At December 31st, 305 million in mortgages were financed. 146 were financed using bond proceeds, and 159 million were financed through the secondary market trading. This results in a little over 3 million in secondary market trading gains. Tracy then presented a summary schedule on the single-family portfolio, noting 284 million increase in the overall principal balance from the December 25 to December 26, resulting in a 3.725 billion loan portfolio. She reported a delinquency ratio of 4.73 and commended our servicing staff for their efforts to help borrowers remain in their current on their mortgages. And finally, Tracy advised the committee that the financial strategy for the remainder of the fiscal year is to fund mortgages through a combination of bond issuance and the secondary market, while continuing to closely monitor interest rate conditions. So I will entertain any questions on these items.
Anybody have any questions of Barry regarding this? All right,
Wow,
Barry,
you
sounds
know, I
like you
read
did
it
a good
really
job.
well. No, actually Tracy did the really great job. You'll need to see the presentation you'll make in a few minutes. So, Mr. Chairman, this concludes my report. There's no board action requested at this time.
Okay. So the next thing we need to do is have Tracy present her financial statements, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Tracy, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm here today to present to you the second quarter financial update. I am not going to go into great detail on this, as we just went through it with the Finance Committee the other day. I will say we're having another good year, profitable year, no surprises, so it's a good report. I'll start with a balance sheet here. Looking at just a couple points up here, total assets in line D increased by 63 million, and total liabilities in line I increased by 51 million since June 30th. This continues to show our profitability via net interest income and also some profit generated from our operating budget. Going down to line J, the net position before the mark-to-market is an increase of 11 million. Looking at K, the mark-to-market, line K, this is, again, as I've explained before, required by GASB to mark our securities to market. The market value of the securities improved about 13 million, a trend we saw last year. Most of those are securities that are in our new indenture and continue to grow as we add to it. So going down to line L, the overall net position at December 31st improved by 24 million to 528 million, mostly as a result of booking that mark-to-market and then decent profit 6 months in. Any questions on the balance sheet?
So basically, book entry situation, right?
It is. I'm scared to see what it looks like when it comes back down, but right now it makes our books look good. Moving on to the income statement, much like I highlighted on the balance sheet, we had a good 6 months into the fiscal year. Our total revenues in line G are just under $40 million, which includes the mark-to-market improvement of about $7.3 million in line F. Our total expenses in line M is just under $18 million, resulting in operating income of $22 million. So since that mark-to-market is a non-cash entry, we like to take it out. So if you go down to line U, the change in net position, excluding the mark-to-market, is $11 million 6 months in. So we're moving and cruising along here. There's nothing to really highlight here on the statement of cash flows, but you've heard a lot so far this year. At the bottom there, that is our mortgage production activity. We're on pace as we were last year, and we've financed about $305 million 6 months in. So we're navigating the market well enough. The next two schedules represent our operating budget. I'll point you to line G, total HUD fees and admin reimbursements. Unfavorable budget by $1 million. That number, $20,700,000, Kendrick went through earlier with his presentation. The fluctuations in a little bit less fee income for homeless programs as a strategy, and we're favorable in our rental assistance program due to some additional fees that we picked up, including those MOR fees. So everything's good there. Looking at the mortgage servicing fees, we're ahead of budget by $703,000. We always budget for these pretty conservatively, not knowing if prepays will pick up or if market conditions changes. But as you've heard, our servicing operation's running quite well this year. And then line H, rental production, is $778 million favorable to budget. Again, this was brought up earlier. This is the timing of projects closing. We had a big push in December to get some of those bond projects closed because they had expiring volume cap attached to them. So that resulted in a little bit more fee income 6 months in. So overall, line P, we're about $1.8 million favorable to budget with a surplus of $4.4 million halfway through the year. And lastly is our expenditure schedule. The only thing I'll point out here again is the mortgage servicing default costs is $263,000 unfavorable to budget. There's a few things that's taken place this year. One, the loss mitt options have changed. There's a lot of options for homeowners looking at foreclosure during COVID. It's changed back to kind of pre-COVID conditions. So there's not, they get referred to foreclosure a little bit more quickly than they had the last 4 to 5 years. The HUD allowable fees associated with property preservation costs and court costs has also increased. That has increased our costs. So something we're monitoring. We're ahead on revenues with servicing as well. So nothing I'm concerned about. Our foreclosure ratio is very low. So it's just an uptick in fees for the most part. So line P overall, I'm on the wrong page. At the bottom, overall, we're still on budget. We're ahead on revenues. Staff are managing their budgets very, very well. So really good report. 6 months in, I don't see any issues for the rest of the fiscal year.
Tracy, you do a wonderful job, and thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Any members have any questions of Tracy? If not, Tracy, do you want to issue $600 million worth of bonds?
Probably not, but I figure I'd cover my bases just in case.
Okay.
Up for your consideration is a board agenda item requesting approval to issue housing revenue bonds for 2026. Back in 2023, we created a new general indenture of trust. Pursuant to the general indenture trust, we may issue bonds from time to time in one or more series indentures to obtain the funds to carry out our homeownership program. I'm seeking approval today to issue an amount not to exceed $600 million on or before March 1st, 2027. This essentially provides staff and our external financing partners greater flexibility in managing the mortgage pipeline, and better opportunities to capitalize on favorable market conditions if they occur. Essentially, our municipal advisors advised us this year to do smaller deals more frequently to kind of navigate changing market conditions. I don't think we're going to come close to 600 million, but there's a lot of unknowns going on out there, so I'm seeking approval to move forward with multiple bond issuances.
So do any members have any questions of Tracy in regard to this bond issue? So if not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve her request for 600 million. All right. Have a second? Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
You got your work cut out for you, Tracy.
Yes, I do.
All right. Go right ahead. You got another resolution?
Yeah, I've got a couple contracts for you all. The first is an authorization to renew a personal service contract with Crow LLP for audit of our financial statements. In 2024, we issued a request for proposals for audit services and received 3 responses. We evaluated those responses and selected Crow. We have the option to renew the contract for 2 consecutive years. This will be the second renewal. I will say this is the 15th year we would enter into a contract with Crow. We do have an auditing procurement rule that the managing partner needs to change every 6 years. Brad Shelley, this would be his 4th year with us as managing partner if this is approved. So we recommend approval by the board to authorize us to enter into a contract with Crow in an amount not to exceed $165,000.
Any members have any questions of Tracy in regard to this personal service contract? If not, I'll entertain a motion by Holly, second, need a second, okay? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. I would like for the record to reflect that I abstained because I have a substantial business relationship with Crow. Okay, Tracy, you got a personal service contract with Kane Mitter.
Yes, so Kane Mitter, these are the folks that are going to help me figure out how to use those bonds. So this is authorization to renew a personal service contract with Kane Mitter and Associates for quantitative consulting services. We require these services to perform bond structure analysis, mortgage and investment portfolio participation, flow of funds compliance, and cash flow projections. Following a request for proposal in 2025, 2 responses were received by the corporation and Kane Mitter was selected. We have an option to renew the contract for 2 years. This would be the first renewal of the contract. We're recommending approval for a contract in an amount not to exceed $650,000.
Only 2 responses were received.
Yes.
For a $650,000 contract.
It is a very, very specific skill set these folks have to deal with our 2 parity indentures and the housing bond market in general.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a business to get into.
It's not to exceed 600. Do you have an idea of what was billed on last year?
Yes. So there's 2 components of this contract. One is their general oversight and guidance on the existing indentures, and that's for $275,000. And then for when we do bond issuances, there's certain fees associated with the specific issuances. That is $60,000 per transaction, an additional $20,000 if it involves a taxable component, an additional $20,000 if there's a refunding of bonds, an additional $10,000 if we do variable rate. So in fiscal 20, they're under a different contract in fiscal 25, where we only had 1 indenture. So far this year, we have spent $137,500 on their general services and $130,000. Overall, we'll probably spend $535,000 before the fiscal year ends.
Any other members have any questions? Tracy? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve this personal service contract. Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tracy. We appreciate your hard work. All right, so Derek Morris, personal service contract with Kentucky and Property. Welcome, Mr. Morris, we appreciate it.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Derek Morris, and I serve as the Director of Mortgage Servicing here at Kentucky Housing Corporation. I am seeking your approval this afternoon to renew contracts related to our property preservation services. Pursuant to the servicing requirements of the Federal Housing Administration, Rural Housing Service, Veterans Affairs, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, KHC is required to obtain property preservation and inspection services on delinquent and defaulted loans when properties become vacant or otherwise present increased risks. These vendors we utilize, provide critical property preservation services that ensure proper maintenance, protect asset value, and support compliance across KHC's mortgage servicing portfolio. KHC is reimbursed through the insurer's claim process for a majority of the funds paid to these property preservation companies. Accordingly, we are requesting the board's authorization to renew our contracts with Kentucky Property Preservations, Kentuckiana Property Preservations LLC in an amount not to exceed $800,000, Paid to Buy Realty LLC in an amount not to exceed $250,000, and Wolverine Real Estate Services in an amount not to exceed $1 million for property preservation and/or inspection services.
Any members have any questions of Mr. Morris in regard to these? So, if not, I'll entertain a motion that they be approved. Someone? Ollie? And a second? Mayor? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Morris. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate your hard work.
Thank you.
All right, Kevin Field, authorization to renew a personal service contract with Regulatory Solutions. Welcome, Mr. Field. How are you, sir?
Doing fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Agenda item number 16 for your consideration is for a resolution for the authorization to renew a personal service contract with Regulatory Solutions LLC for quality control review services. So Kentucky Housing Corporation requires services to perform these quality control reviews in accordance with Fannie Mae, FHA, Freddie Mac, RHS, and VA under their regulatory requirements for its single-family mortgage lending and its loan servicing department or mortgage servicing department. So following a request for proposals process that we underwent back in February of '25, Regulatory Solutions was selected by a review committee to provide quality control services. KHC has the option of renewing the contract for 2 consecutive years after the initial term of the contract. This would be the first renewal of that contract. So I would be glad to answer any questions anyone has about these quality control services or the contract.
Any members have any questions of Mr. Field in regard to this personal service contract? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve.
So moved.
Barry, do I have a second? Okay, we have a second. And all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you,
sir.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, down to 17, authorization for personal service contract with Friar Environmental. Sam, you're gonna take this?
Yes, so I'll be taking this today in the board's absence. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. KHC is requesting authorization to renew a personal service contract with Fry Environmental for quality control reviews of the environmental review records for both single-family and multifamily projects. So, as part of the requirements for HUD funding, we are required to conduct environmental reviews on properties, and so this is to provide quality control reviews of those reviews that we oversee during that process. We issued an RFP in 2025, and we received no submissions. In the absence of competitive responses, we entered into non-competitive negotiations with Fry Environmental and selected them. We've successfully worked with them in the past, and they've provided quality control review services and also guidance and training on environmental review process. So KHC has the option to renew the contract for 2 consecutive years. This will be the first renewal. And staff recommend approval by the board of a resolution authorizing renewal of this personal service contract.
I have a question.
Yes.
We might have talked about it last year, but did Fry ever indicate why they didn't competitively bid for the contract?
I don't have an answer to that question.
The only thing I would say, in my business, it's really hard to find anybody doing any environmental work right now. And they don't wanna bid on it. You know, at least that's my experience in my business.
How did we find them then?
They had conducted trainings for us in the past. They've spoken at our conference, and they had performed environmental review services for developers as well, I believe.
But this is an important consideration, especially if you have to take a foreclosure property back to have an environmental review, if you need to do that, right?
Well, this is for this is for the HUD process, the HUD environmental review process.
Okay. So any other members have any questions of Sam in regard to this? So I entertain a motion that we approve.
Motion approved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Matt. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign, motion carries. Okay, so, Winston, we're down to informational items, and we'll turn it over to you.
Well, we're gonna try to be quick today. First, let me thank you all for being here today. I know it's a long meeting and a very tedious agenda. Thank you all for your cooperation in helping us get through it very, very promptly with the leadership of Chair Denham in doing that. I'm gonna turn the program over for the 2 items that we have to our General Counsel, Sam Thorner, who's gonna give us an update on federal housing funding and legislation, as well as an update on state housing legislation. Let me say, as a preliminary matter, both of these we could talk all day about. I don't think any of us have the time or the ability to talk all day about. So the comments that Sam's gonna give us is gonna be at a fairly high level. If you want some additional follow-up information on either of them, please feel free to pick up the phone and call me, call Sam, and we'll try to give you more detail on it. I can't give you an exact number, but maybe Sam can. There's probably at least 30 different pieces of legislation pending in the current legislature that affect housing. More legislation out this year than in prior years, so there's a lot of interest in housing this year. And on the federal level, each of the federal programs that are pending now, the House that has passed the House and the Senate version, all of those are so complex, and that we could spend hours on each section of the bills that contain many sections. So, Sam?
Thank you, Winston, members of the board. I will start with the funding landscape. So if you recall, the federal government was finally able to pass a funding bill for HUD programs as well as a number of other programs earlier this year in January. And I think I previously presented on a couple of different versions of that bill. The final version of that bill did include funding for, at approximately level amounts for all the programs that we administer. So business essentially as usual from a funding standpoint. Some programs received a slight bump, some programs received level funding, some programs were zeroed out, but not anything that's, a lot of the programs that were zeroed out weren't ones that impact KHC, and they were much smaller programs that may have already been funded at that level anyway.
And that takes us to the end of September, right, Sam?
Yeah, that funding will take us through the end of September this year, so this federal fiscal year. If you have any questions like specifically about that, I'm happy to answer them, but I want to keep this high level of brief. If not, I'll move on to other federal legislation related.
Why'd you look at me, Mike?
I'll move on to other federal legislation around housing. So, a few weeks ago, maybe last month, the House passed a 21st Century Housing Act, and this piece of legislation is not a funding legislation. It's more designed to modernize some of the HUD programs, update some of the regulatory barriers that these programs experience, and enhance the banking side of the HUD programs. So some of the things that this legislation would do is streamline the environmental review process, creating more exceptions so that the process is updated and modernized, which it hasn't been in a very long time. It would increase the amount of funding that banks could use to fund affordable housing projects. Generally speaking, these are all great initiatives, and this was passed in overwhelming bipartisan manner. I think it was 390 to 9. So very much support behind this. And on the Senate side, last year they had passed a similar bill that had a lot of similar provisions. There are some differences, and I just learned today that I think it looks like they're going to try to pass it again separately. It was originally passed as part of another bill that the amendment got dropped. They're trying to pass this separately so that then it will go to a conferencing process. You know, the NCSHA has supported this bill, which is the organization of all HFAs across the country. This would basically update programs that haven't been updated, like the Home Investment Partnership Program has not been updated since its inception in the 90s, and so this would remove some of the procedural barriers that exist within the program structure to make it easier to administer for us and for everyone else who does this work. So, very, very high level overview of what these do, but I'm happy to go into more detail with anyone if they want.
I'll look to this side of the room, see if anybody has any questions.
Bill, you wanna come over here and say?
I'm good with that.
Okay, I will move on to state legislation. I'm, again, gonna keep it pretty high level. There have been a number of proposals from a variety of different sources, including members of the Housing Task Force, on legislation surrounding housing. So, a couple of examples that I'll pull that you might be familiar with. So, there's a proposal that was filed actually last year that was reintroduced this year that would exempt affordable housing developed by religious institutions from zoning and permitting requirements, colloquially referred to as yes in God's backyard. There have been a number of different proposals relating to updating the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the funding mechanism behind that. Some of those proposals include direct allocation of funding to the AHTF. Some of them involve updating the recording fee process, which is how the AHTF is normally funded. So there have been a few proposals around that, including by members of the task force. There have been multiple bills filed in, I think, one in each chamber relating to the creation of a residential housing development district and creating housing development incentive payments by local governments to incentivize the creation of new housing. And there have been a couple of proposals related to revolving funds for various housing purposes, including new construction of single-family, multifamily housing, and rehabbing of abandoned homes. This is just a few examples. There have also been proposals related to zoning and permitting requirements, making those much more streamlined and faster so that we can get quicker new starts. There's a lot, and you know, I don't know, we're still sort of early days of figuring out. I think the House has not passed very many pieces of legislation to go to the Senate. I think the only one of these that has passed one chamber, I think, is the yes in God's backyard. So we're still trying to figure out, you know, which ones are likely to pass and providing information to people who ask us about these various bills. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Are there any bills that give you heartburn down there, Sam, that are concerning to you?
There have been a couple introduced that would be challenging for us. There was one that related to that would mandate all housing funds that are administered by organizations like KHC in the state to devote 90% of the resources to single family and only 10% to multifamily. This would be challenging for a number of reasons. The way that the legislation was worded, it could have been interpreted to apply to all of our programs, but you know, I don't know how likely something like that would be to pass.
Have you all had any, I guess, collaboration with either body on a bill to be introduced, or is it largely reactive? How are you all pursuing that? Is there any sort of legislative initiatives y'all are pursuing?
No, I think the way to summarize that is.
I know the housing I know y'all have been very active, but I don't know if there's
Yeah.
a specific kind of ask that is yet to be seen.
I think the way to answer that
Ongoing
is to say that we have consistently for at least the last 6 months or so stated that we support basically 3 initiatives that the legislature or the executive branch could undertake. One of them is a better funding stream for the Affordable Housing Trust, and there is legislation been introduced to do that. We'll see where that goes, and I think there's actually 2 different ways of doing that. One, as Sam has mentioned, is an appropriation from the general fund. The other is fees. The second piece is we've recommended that the state enact a state housing tax credit similar to the federal housing tax credit and the low-income housing tax credit, which you all have heard about today and many, many times before. And and that's been consistently recommended by the developers in this area. And to my knowledge, there's been, there may be one piece of legislation in the House that would have incorporated that. There does not appear to be any widespread support or activity for that type of enactment at this point in time. And the third would be to create a revolving loan fund that could be used for infrastructure or for the construction of housing. And there have been some bills that have touched on the structural ability to do that, but unless there's something that was included in the bill that was introduced last night, there is, to my knowledge, no funding except funding that was included in the governor's proposed budget that he introduced at the beginning of the session of the legislature. And then I think some funding was included in a Democratic version of their own bill that was introduced maybe a month or 6 weeks ago, or very early on. But there's not been, to my knowledge, any bipartisan or any widespread or any Republican endorsement of funding for such a revolving loan fund at this particular point in time. Have I misstated anything, Sam or Wendy?
I think that's accurate.
I think everybody's still hoping for that distinct bill to be filed with the one-time appropriations.
Yeah.
As everybody else is right now. Have you all recognized, in terms of permitting, there's ease in permitting and streamline this process is always a good thing to do, but is that a serious impediment to increased activity? I'd have to think that'd be offsetting infrastructure costs.
I've sat through and have heard most of the testimony that has been presented to the Housing Task Force. And it was pretty repetitive, I felt like, throughout the entire testimony, and that would be consistent with everything that we've heard from the people that we've been in contact with in the industry, that those are serious impediments. And
I know
maybe
in my community it has been said that way.
Yeah.
Hasn't been my personal experience, but I know.
Well, living in Louisville, Kentucky, I know, and reading our local paper, it's considered to be a very serious impediment in that jurisdiction. Now, there's some jurisdictions around the state, of course, that have no planning and zoning. They do have permitting processes. The timing of the permitting processes varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So I consider it to be a serious problem. It is not a issue that we as Kentucky Housing, or at least as the executive leadership of Kentucky Housing, has chosen to weigh in on as something that we felt we should champion. I mean, that is really a matter for the Chamber of Commerce, for the local cities and county governments, and it tends to be very controversial because I think the League of Cities and the county groups take a different view from what the Chamber of Commerce might take on that issue. So,
There's a lot of different
but there is legislation that's been introduced that address both of those issues.
And where the housing development districts, that's why I asked about the infrastructure component to it, because that was kind of TIF-like scenario.
Yeah.
Great.
Any other questions?
I have an opinion. I don't know that I'm always right.
Yeah.
And then I'll form the rest of my comments in the form of a question to everyone else, just to see what you think. I'm not saying that the changes in the process and streamlining permits and parking and building codes is good, bad, right, or wrong. I'm not saying that. But it just seems to me that these are not things that will help close the housing gap and create affordable living. Whether it's multifamily, single family, regardless of patio homes, regardless of what it is. It just seems that these are not the answers. So I kind of like everybody's opinion on that. Again, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. And then I was hoping that the KPDI money has been very successful throughout the Commonwealth for several communities. I was hoping for something like that on housing to help entice builders and developers to come to your community if you applied and received that money, that you could help those builders with the infrastructure. Because buying Mr. Smith's farm, 5 miles out of town and making it a subdivision or whatever, is one thing, and then you divide that into lots and you got to purchase the lot before you ever start on the house. By the time you divide the amount you give for the property by the amount of lots in the property is one cost. But when you add curbs, gutters, lighting, sidewalks, underground electric, gas, all this stuff, the lot went from maybe 20,000 to 75,000. And if you could take some KPDI money that local governments, counties, or cities have applied for and help that developer with some of that cost of infrastructure, it may entice him to come to your, does any of that make sense to anybody else? Because if this is a good idea, somebody else should have already thought about it. I'd never come up with a good idea on my own.
Well, I may give the wrong answer, and I
don't know that there is one.
I stand to be overruled by any member of our staff here that is more knowledgeable about it than I am. But I think that what you're talking about, the infrastructure and that sort of approach, the concept is embodied in House Bill, Senate Bill 8, that is Senator Higgins, not Higgins, but Randy Mills' bill, that
Robbie Mills.
Robbie Mills. I think that concept is in that bill, if I understand.
And it may be, because sometimes what our concept is and how it's written and you interpret it, we don't even know if we're on the same page, right?
Right.
It could be, it could be.
Yeah. And with reference to your comments about parking and permits and things, my personal opinion, it is a factor in the housing gap that we have. It is a factor in some communities, and in other communities, it's not a factor at all. So, but I would defer to Wendy.
Well, I think that it depends on where you are. Like, I live in Marion County, we have no zoning in Marion County. It's pretty easy to build whatever you want, wherever you want, which can also be a problem, right? But it's not hard to build housing there.
Same in Carroll County.
But we still have a gap. We still need more housing, so it's not the thing. So it's kind of, what we keep saying is, there are a menu of things that have to be done, and some of it depends on where you are. Louisville's gotta make it easier to get through the process, but that alone isn't necessarily gonna solve it all. We've gotta have some low-cost resources to get buildable sites, which is kind of what you're getting at.
Just having worked for 5 years to get the only thing that actually incentivizes housing that is affordable for purchase or rent into the 850 pages of the Land Development Code in Louisville, I just want to say there is a lot of hatred and calcified racism built in to the Land Development Code and zoning. And it is not the developers, it's the people who don't want other people near them. And that is the biggest impediment. Or we could have, an easier amount of, an easier process for building. But all those barriers, they are to keep Louisville as segregated as it can possibly be by race and by income and by family type.
Just let me say that there's no one magic deal, and there are a lot of things that are gonna have to be overhauled, permitting. One of the problems I see in counties that do not have zoning is if you have any commercial activity or trying to do a subdivision, you have to go through housing, buildings, and construction statement. And with that, and a lot of times that's problematic. So the permitting, all these things, in my opinion, for us to solve this gap, we're gonna have to overhaul a lot of things, and it's gonna take a long time. I mean, it's not gonna happen overnight.
One of the things I saw yesterday is, both, I think, Winston and Wendy both touched on that it's not a one-size-fits-all for each community. And at the Board of Directors meeting at the League of Cities yesterday, discussing through the bills that have been filed that affect cities, specifically the zoning and housing, that Board of Directors is a large majority of the time all on the same page. And on these issues, they're not. Because you've got Covington needing and wanting this, and then you might have Sadieville needing and wanting this, and it was pretty split. Now, nobody had a falling out, right? I mean, it's business, but it's not one size fits all. So what the takeaway from it was, when we're deciding if we're gonna support or remain neutral or oppose any bill, as city leaders across the state, let's make sure we're thinking about everybody. What's good for me might damage 50 other cities, that they're friends, right? We're all, so, that was the takeaway yesterday, is it's not one size fits all, so.
That's consistent with the observations that I've had about this throughout, and it's one of the things that I think, unites and divides. It all depends upon which of those issues you're a part of, and I think, from a personal point of view, I can't speak on behalf of this organization or the entire leadership of this organization. It's one of the reasons that I felt like we are to keep our toe out of that water.
Sure.
Because what we want to do is try to identify things that can uniformly assist housing starts across the state. And I think that the proposals that we articulated ourselves on are those that are fairly universally recognized as and accepted as that. The reluctance has been to spend the money. And, so we could get where we, I think, need to be on a lot of major things if there wasn't the obstacle of getting the funding.
Mr. Chairman, I've talked long enough. I appreciate you letting me speak.
Thank you, we appreciate your comments. Any other members have anything they want to talk about that's not on the agenda? Winston, do you have anything?
No.
Sam? Any staff members? Wendy? Okay. Wendy, by the way, you did an excellent job on KET the other night.
Thank you,
You're
appreciate
getting to
it.
be a real TV star.
I'm big in public media.
Anyway, thank you all for attending. I want to send out a thanks to the staff here. They do a marvelous job, and they're to be commended for their hard work. So if there is nothing else to come before this board, I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn, Mr. Jones.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman.